Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, and two other top Army generals on Thursday. Dismissals have come as the U.S. appears poised to intensify strikes, and the Pentagon is weighing a potential ground invasion in Iran. In a post, Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell framed General George's firing as a retirement, effective immediately. A U.S. official told CNN that senior Army leadership had been caught off guard. Quote, "It doesn't feel like a very thought-out decision," unquote. Now, I have been personally covering General Randy George's career for about 15 years. I wrote a book in 2012 about the ill-fated combat outpost Keating, which had been, in 2006, placed in a dangerous position in Afghanistan. Then Colonel Randy George and his Lieutenant Colonel Brad Brown tried to shut down that outpost in 2008 because of the precarious position it was in, although their warnings were not heeded with any urgency. And then Cop Keating was devastatingly attacked in 2009. Those who know General Randy George consider him to be well-respected, smart, strategic, someone who acts with the best interests of his service members and the United States at the top of his mind. His dismissal, along with that of Chief of Chaplains Major General William Green Jr. and Commander of Army Transformation and Training Command General David Hodney, are just the latest in a string of abrupt firings that Hegseth has carried out inside the Pentagon since he took office. Hegseth has fired more than a dozen senior military officers over the last year. In fact, he's almost completely remade the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Just two officials remained from before President Trump took office: Marine Corps Commandant General Eric Smith and Chief of Space Operations General B. Chance Saltzman. Now, you might have noticed if you look at that photo, Hegseth's version of the Joint Chiefs, those are entirely white men, despite the fact that as of 2024, nearly 33% of active duty service members are of color, and nearly 18% are women. Hegseth made it quite clear that that type of representation in the top ranks does not matter to him.
The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest. Physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. We're reviving the warrior ethos. We're eliminating the distractions and the debris. No more DEI.
Two of the first leaders Hegseth let go were former Joint Chiefs Chair General C.Q. Brown, the second black officer to hold that post, and Chief of Naval Operations Lisa Franchetti, the first woman to lead the U.S. Navy. Just last week, the New York Times reported that in an extraordinarily rare move, Hegseth was actively blocking the promotions of 4 Army officers. Officials saying 2 of the officers are black, 2 of them are women. Parnell defended the promotion process to the New York Times as apolitical and unbiased, unquote. The New York Times reports that Army Secretary Dan Driscoll repeatedly refused to let Hegseth strike those officers' names from the promotion list. Officials told the Times that Driscoll took heat from Hegseth's Chief of Staff, the controversial Ricky Berea, for promoting Major General Antoinette Gant to command the military district of Washington. The Times reporting, quote, "Mr. Berea told Mr. Driscoll that President Trump would not want to stand next to a black female officer at military events," the official said, unquote. Berea denies that story. Driscoll is someone Hegseth perceives as a threat, sources tell CNN. Unsurprisingly, he has worked closely with the now retired General Randy George. Hegseth's firing sprees targeting women, targeting people of color, or even just those he feels personally threatened by. This all comes as the U.S. is weighing a further escalation in the already unpopular war in Iran, a ground invasion that could potentially risk the lives of thousands of troops, which only 11% of U.S. adults polled by CNN support. In that same poll, incidentally, Secretary Hegseth himself is registering at a 35% approval rating, with 65% of the American people disapproving. And now, without the guidance of tenured military officials who have served for decades honorably, that guidance, because Secretary Hegseth is either dismissed or hamstrung for reasons that remain unclear to even top military officers, now the Trump administration is scrambling to prove to the American people that there is a clear plan for the war in Iran and that it's worth the costs of thousands of U.S. troops that they're putting in harm's way. Let's bring in Washington Post reporter Dan Lamont, who covers the Pentagon, and the military has broken a lot of these stories. Dan, can you put in perspective what the firing of General Randy George will mean for the leadership of the Pentagon right now?
Yeah, I mean, Randy George has been in the Army for more than 40 years. I met him just maybe a year or two after you did, when he was a 1-star general at the Army War College in Pennsylvania. He's a thoughtful guy. I honestly have no idea which party he would belong to politically. He kind of adheres to that old school nonpartisan sort of idea that you would hope for in your generals.
So a source familiar with what happened tells me that the firing was entirely about these promotions and personnel matters. That's the reason, and that General George requested a meeting with Hegseth. Hegseth refused to give it to him, and they fired him and leaked it to the media at the same time. What's going on here? Why would Hegseth do this?
I think this is a significant final data point in sort of the Randy George Army saga under Hegseth. I do think it's more complex than it being just about this event. My own reporting would suggest that there's been sort of this churn on this. How long will Randy George last? Whether or not Randy George is acceptable to Hegseth, really going back many months. And that Dan Driscoll, who had really kind of hit a good teamwork kind of vibe with the general, really did like him, really did want to keep him, and was increasingly frustrated trying to make the case to Secretary Hegseth. What
was the issue beyond the issue of personnel and promotions? What are the other issues?
I mean, I think some of it is the senior Pentagon staff right now. There are people who literally are combing through biographies, combing through past testimony, looking for what they said on diversity 3, 5, 7 years ago, and kind of building a dossier of sorts, trying to assemble who kind of fits the mold they're looking for. Randy George had served under the Biden administration. Randy George specifically had been a senior military assistant to Lloyd Austin, Biden's defense secretary. In testimony, when asked candid questions, he was in favor of diversity as part of a broader effort to have unit cohesion in the Army.
There are thousands of troops deployed to the Middle East right now, as we all wait to see if the U.S. is going to commence with a ground operation in Iran. Is there a sense that there's any confidence that give us the sense of confidence in Hegseth's leadership among those who are directly impacted in the U.S. military?
I think it's pretty divided. I don't think by any means it's universally against. There are people who really kind of buy into his lethality rhetoric, but there is significant concern that he's perhaps not fully appreciating the gravity of this situation, particularly when you look at things today, like the pilot down on the ground. This is something that was a foreseeable circumstance in a serious campaign with numerous aircraft up against a country that also has anti-aircraft.
Dan Lamott, The Washington Post. Thank you so much. Good to have you, sir.
There is rarely a good time to do a shakeup in the military. And now Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has pushed out 3 generals during wartime. First, U.S. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George was ordered to retire yesterday. And now we've learned 2 more generals have been forced out. Major General William Green, Jr., who served as the Chief of Chaplains, and General David Hodney, commander of the Army Transformation and Training Command. Now the military is missing critical combat experience as the war with Iran enters week 6. And joining me now, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Russell Honore. General, good to see you again. Let me ask you about these 3 generals who have been pushed out by Secretary Hegseth. The Pentagon has not given an explicit reason for why they were fired. What do you make of the dismissals?
Well, I've been quite two traditional as well as decisions about the going into boots on the ground in Iran that the secretary, the chief of staff of the Army would have had some major input on. The boots on the ground decision, when and where. His job is to prepare. His job is to make sure all the air defenses that's been defending our allies are prepared. And sometime I've served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a 2-star general. The service chiefs do have a vote and try to influence the decisions made by the Secretary of Defense and by the President. And I sense with this Secretary of Defense, disagreement means dissent, and that if there's not good discussions on what decision is going to be made and how they're going to do it, then they serve no purpose. I think what he's looking for is yes people, loyalists who will do what he says and how he said do it, as opposed to following the customs and traditions of the military that we want to have active debate before we do something. I don't think he tolerates that. If you go question him on why did you take those officers off the promotion list? Why are we changing the rank of the chaplains? Maybe we ought to discuss this. He does not tolerate any discussion. He's got a big ego problem, and that could have long-standing impact to our military.
General Russell Honore, thank you so much for being with me this evening. Always good to see you.
Good evening. God bless America, and hope we can find that pilot.
Indeed.
Tonight, a shakeup at the Pentagon amid the ongoing war in Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has fired the Army's top general, and a source tells CNN that Hegseth told Army Chief of Staff General Randy George to retire immediately. 2 other senior leaders are also out. Another source reveals that the decision to fire George was abrupt, but expected. George and Hegseth had been at odds for months after Hegseth blocked the promotion of several Army officers, including 2 women and 2 who are Black. The source says that George demanded to see Hegseth about the issue, but Hegseth denied the meeting. The purge comes just days after President Trump signaled that the U.S. would intensify strikes in Iran, and as the Pentagon weighs a potential ground invasion. Isaiah Martin is here with us.